Today is Thanksgiving Day, year 2001, November 23rd. And 1 week from today, let's see, 29th, I will be 84 years old. Okay, and granddaughter Amanda has asked me to relate to you some of the memories of my life. So we'll start way back when I can first remember. I was born, of course, in Clear Lake, Minnesota, northern Minnesota. We moved to Minneapolis, where Floyd was born, after I had diphtheria, and my dad's hospital bills were $1,300, and he sold out the farm to pay the hospital bill, and then on he worked out till we moved here in Easton in 1935. Then he worked at the flour mills and the tanning factory in Minneapolis. From there we moved to Windham, Minnesota. Why, I don't know, but we moved out to Windham, and that's where Johnny was born. Then my recollections begin that I started first grade at the Hill School in Windham, and there was 4 rooms in the school, so there was 2 classes in each room, and I started in first grade. We walked to school, of course, and we had a few blocks to go, and came home for lunch and went back to school after lunch. School then was from about 9 to 4 o'clock usually. I think I'll have to start remembering what I did as a kid at that age. And we lived in Windham until I was going into the 5th grade. So I had to be about 8, 10 years old, and things were tough. It was hard for Dad to find a job, and so I spent a lot of time working the railroad tracks, walking the railroad tracks with a wagon to find coal. And when there was a bunch of us kids would have to do that, to try and get coal for our homes. And we hit a car down in Windham where they unloaded a car with a coal, a box car. It had double sides. We'd get in there after they had emptied it, and we would dig down into the double sides and we'd throw this coal out, and that's when we'd really get a real fly. We were real happy to go home with a whole bag full of coal.
What year was that?
Well, let's see, I was born in 17, and that's when I was in 2nd grade, so that would make me about 8.
So right before the Depression?
25, about 1925.
So right before the Depression?
What?
Right before the Depression.
Before the Depression, right.
Okay.
And if we wanted money for soda or a penny candy store, we had a penny candy store in Windham, I'd walk the roads for pop bottles. We'd find pop bottles, get 2 cents a piece for a pop bottle, and then that was our spending money for candy. But in picking coal lots of times around the railroad tracks, because a lot would fall off these cars that come in loaded so heavy or pass through Windham so heavy, we had to cross a river bridge over the Des Moines River, right down there where Aunt Elsie and Uncle Alfred lived. And there would be 3 or 4 of us kids would cross the river. There were lots of times coming back across that bridge, we'd be caught with a train coming. So we'd hang out to the side of the bridge while the train went by. And I think of that now as young as I was, 2nd or 3rd grade, 4th grade doing that, And the folks didn't seem to worry about it. They were just glad we were out there hustling, I guess. Then I remember the Depression. The day that the banks closed, my dad and I walked downtown Windham, and there were 40, 50 people out in front of the one bank and clamoring to get inside, but the bank's doors were locked. They couldn't get in. But my dad didn't have to worry about it because he did not have any money in the bank, naturally. But the Depression was tough. You were lucky if you had food, clothing, and shelter. We were thankful for that. Windham had 2 butcher shops, one on the north side and one on the south side of the square. Windham was built around the square block with the courthouse in the middle. And we would go to one day and ask for dog bones and beef bones, and I'd go to the other one. And the next week we'd change opposite stores. And they probably must have discovered that we would probably use them for Mom to make soup. So, and she would add rice and both barley and noodles and stuff to it. So they left a little more meat on the bones. But Dad throughout the winter would cut wood, and he also got a permit from the Township Land Company of Windham, Minnesota to trap. And so in the spring, we did a lot of trapping. I went with my dad a lot when I wasn't in school. We'd trap muskrats and mink. And then we'd bring them home, we'd skin them. I learned to skin mink very good, muskrats when I was only in 4th grade. I could skin them real fast. And then we'd put them on a board, and he hung them up in the attic and dried them, and then he sold them. I think he used to get from 50 cents to $1.50 a piece for them in those days, you know. So that was a little extra money. The Depression was extremely hard on everybody. People doubled up in their families because they couldn't pay their rents. And I think our rent was about $8 or $10 a month in Wyndham. And we always had a small barn in every place we lived there in Wyndham, even on the hill. They called it the hill, way above the main town. So there was always a small barn. So we always had a couple of pigs and a few chickens, and that helped with the table, provide for the table. My dad, if he had any money, he would go out and buy ear corn from the farmers to feed the pigs. But if he didn't, we had to resort to what as I think back now, actually stealing. We'd go out in the middle of the night and to some farmer's cornfield way back off the main road and pick a couple sacks of corn for our pig. And that's the way we survived. And I think now, well, good Lord forgive us for stealing that corn from those poor farmers to feed our pigs. And
so during the Depression, Pappy, did you read a lot of newspapers?
No, I don't know. I don't think you couldn't afford a paper. You never bought a paper.
No?
Dad also had the job. Him and old Hans Nelson took on the job then of painting all the county bridges by hand. There were quite a few county bridges in Cottonwood County. And I would go out lots of times, spend the whole day with my dad, and I'd just walk around the fields and discover the meadowlark nests and song sparrow nests. And I enjoyed those days going along with Pop and old Hans Nelson. We lived in 2 places in Wyndham. Like I said, they both had small barns where we had raised chickens and pigs. Pop became a bootlegger, and they were in it pretty big in Wyndham, Minnesota.
This was during Prohibition?
Yeah, during Prohibition. And he and Uncle Alfred helped the farmer excavate a good-sized area under this farmer's barn, and it was down in there where they had all their great big vats all the way around, and they had their burners. And I don't know how I don't wonder how they afforded to get the sugar for this bootleg, but somebody must have backed them. And they sold a lot of whiskey. Never got caught, very close to getting caught sometimes, but never got caught. And Dad would I'd go with him. It always was put in gallon cans. They looked like tin cans. They were real bright and shiny. They were brand new. And he'd plant a few gallons out along the roads here and there, country roads, certain posts or certain tree. Then we would go down to the pool hall in Wyndham, and Dad would meet the men to pick it up. They'd give him $5 for a gallon, and he'd tell them exactly where it was at, and they would go pick it up. So he never had to deliver much to them. So he bootlegged I don't know how many years, and we were raided once, we lived in Wyndham, by the sheriff. And interestingly, when the sheriff came, also he brought the minister with him, which was quite interesting to me. And Mom was on needles and pins that day. They searched the barn, they searched everything, they couldn't find anything. So that was it. They couldn't find anything, so Pop was clear, you know. But somebody had a suspicion that Dad was bootlegging, but they never caught him. That's the bootlegging story, although when we moved to Sioux Falls, he did a little bootlegging, then we lived on West 33rd Street. And I remember running off quite a few batches for him while he was at work at John Morell and Company. And I think back to that now, it would come out, well, like water, but real potent. It was about 180, 190% proof. It was a real pure stuff. And they would add dried apricots and prunes and stuff to it to give it a little color, the moonshine color, you know. And so we moved to Sioux Falls, 923 North Prairie Avenue, and that's where I started 5th grade in Hawthorne School.
Do you remember what year?
What?
What year was this? Do you remember?
1933, I think it was.
Okay.
33 we moved to Sioux Falls. And we had a small barn there, so Dad raised a couple of pigs and chickens there also. And then we stayed there 2 years, I went to 5th and 6th grade at Hawthorne. All schools in Sioux Falls were named after poets. Emerson, Hawthorne, and Whittier. There were 7 schools in Sioux Falls. They had good school system, very good school system. In fact, Brother Johnny had a bad hernia, and the school district paid for his operation to get that corrected, which was great those days, you know. Then from there we moved to West 33rd Street in Sioux Falls. That was out in the country. We had a 5-acre place with another small barn and a chicken coop and whatnot. And Dad worked at Morrell's then, and his pay was usually 35 cents an hour for a 40-hour week. So he came home with about 12 and a half bucks a week, and the rent was $25 a month there. So it took two weeks rent to pay, 2 weeks work to pay the rent. But we raised a lot of cucumbers and everything else, and made what we could off of selling truck garden stuff. That wasn't great, but it all helped. I went to Mark Twain School, and that was about a mile and a half, 2-mile walk. And it was there I started playing basketball. In 7th or 8th grade, I played on the basketball team. And I enjoyed that. And Lynn, Irene, being a year or two older than me, had started high school. So when I graduated from Mark Twain, we had to walk into Western High School in Sioux Falls. It was a 3-mile walk. And we walked that every day, back and forth. And we could pass every kid in town because we walked so fast, Sullivan and I. So after 8th grade, then we moved to, I went to Western High School for 1 year, freshman year. Then the folks moved to Brandon, South Dakota. A little town east of Sioux Falls. About 150 people lived in the town. And the high school had, the grade school was all, the grades were all down below, and the high school was up above. 2 rooms with freshmen, sophomores in one room, and juniors and seniors in the other room. And there was 43 kids in the whole high school. That was some of my best high school days. For 2 years I went there.
What was the name of the high school?
Brandon High.
Okay.
Brandon High. And that's where I played basketball and softball. I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah. I should have saved some of my school papers from there, because the one had the big headlines. Klein chalks up 15 points for the basketball team. and I lost that one. I never kept track of that one. And I should have, you know. But I love Brandon. It's a small town, and folks moved there because the rent was only $15 a month, and the dad commuted 8 miles to Sioux Falls to go to work. He had this old 25 Dodge, and he couldn't afford a spare tire, so the spare tire was a real extra heavy tire. And every time he got a flat, he would put this old tire on. So he got home to take the other one off and patch it out and go again. I remember one time I took that old Dodge and I went to John Morrell and Company with the Guernsey bull calf. I was going to sell it down at the stockyards. And I don't know who was with me. Mervyn might have been with me, or Toots, I don't know. But they only wanted to give me $1.50 for my calf, for beef, you know, to sell it for slaughter. And I thought, that's not enough money. So we started home, and on the way home we had a flat tire. And there was a farmer working in the field nearby, and while we're changing the tire, he said, we had the calf in a box in the back of the, outside the car. He said, where are you going with the calf? And I said, well, I took it to Sioux Falls and Stockyards, and I didn't like the price they'd give me. He said, well, how much? I said, $1.50. Oh, he said, I'll give you $3. So I sold it to him for $3, sold the calf. So I doubled my money by not selling it in Sioux Falls, down in Sioux Falls at the Stockyards. And so I put the old tire on, made it home, and then we had to take the other one apart, and they were tough to change, and they were big, split rim, you know, and it was always a chore to take those tires apart and patch them, but he didn't have any other means of doing that. Well, while we lived at, I'm going to back up, while we lived at West 33rd Street, and I was in 7th and 8th grade, I spent 2 summers down with Uncle Chris and Aunt Francis in Nebraska, and I enjoyed this. Back there in the hills, no radio, no television, no telephone, just you and the field work and the good neighbors and a lot of coyotes running around, and really thoroughly enjoyed those years down there. But one night, and when the season was over, Toots and Doc came down to pick me, and Irene and Luana came up and stayed with us. She went to school with us for a couple of years as our sister, because Nebraska, one of them country schools was so poor, and they didn't get a good education. So she went to school with us as our sister. Of course, that was illegal, but we all got away with it. And on the way home from there one night, we started out, I don't know what time we started out, but we had on Doc's car and Geneva's, we had 5 flat tires on the way home at 110 miles. And everything that you changed the tire with was under the back seat. Well, Luana and Irene and I were in the back seat. And they also had 2 bags of chicken in burlap bags to take home to Mom and Pop for laying hens from Aunt Francis. Well, the Toots and Doc got so tired of Irene and me and Luana, every time those chickens would make a poop and stink, we'd raise our voices and say, "Phew, it stinks in here," you know. But we always had to get out of the car, get the chickens out of the car, to lift the seat up, get the jack and everything else to fix the flat tires. But 5 flat tires in 110 miles shows you how good the tires were or were not in those days. Well, I have to back up and say, when we lived at Brandon, I worked on a few farms around there, and there was a guy by the name of old Horace Sundin. He was a bachelor, and Mervyn and I would go out there and we'd shock corn all day, from 7 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, and we'd get $1.50 for the day. Of course, he fed us too, but that was pretty good. But that's what we got, $1.50, and that would be us spending money going to go to a movie in Sioux Falls or anything. I think some of my best recollections around Brandon was before we came east. I lived with the Sigford family. They were a Swedish family, and they had a daughter who was a senior, Alice Marie. Donna Bell was a junior, and so was her brother James. And John Lyle was my age and my grade as a sophomore in high school. But I lived with the Sigfords for 6 weeks, and they're a good Christian family. They were just wonderful. They didn't have much, and they gave me $35 for 6 weeks of work. And I worked up to the last couple of days before we started east here. And that's the $35 that I gave my dad to come to Easton. He had sale. We have a bill of sale up there.
Want me to go get it?
Everything he had, and paid up his bills, and he had nothing left. So I gave him my $35, and that's what we came east on. 5 days on the road. We stayed in cabins at night for $1 and $1.50, and we were 5 days on the road. And when we landed here, Dad had $1.50 in his pocket, and the river grapes were wrath people back in those days, because that's what they called us, and everybody that wanted to leave the Midwest, most of them all went to California. We were one of the very few people that came east, and they all sort of go to California. That's where the opportunities are. But fortunately, we came east, and it was a good move for us. When I lived in South Dakota, my other income was trapping pocket gophers. Now, pocket gopher is a small animal that burrows underground. He's got 2 cheap pockets, and he stuffs them full of dirt. Then he goes out and shoves them out on top of the ground, and they make good-sized mounds in the fields. Well, they were always a nuisance to the farmers with their mowers cutting hay and this and that, so they were glad anybody trapped them. So you have to dig down into the hole, find their runway, set your trap in their runway, and then put a shingle, wooden shingles that lay over the top, make the hole dark so you couldn't see. Well, then let the trap set one day, next day you ran the trap line. And the state paid 10 cents a piece for pocket gophers. You had to cut off the front feet, take them down to the courthouse. So I always took them down in a tobacco can, a Prince Albert tobacco can, and they count them. They'd lay them out on the paper towel, or somebody would count them, and they'd give us our money. I sometimes had 10 or 12 pair a week, so I did $1.20 a week, and that was good money in those days. And so Doc found this out, so he said he trapped Minnesota gophers and bring them out to me, because Minnesota didn't pay a bounty on pocket gophers, So South Dakota was buying Minnesota gophers at 10 cents a foot and didn't know it. I'd take them down there and get collect for dock. So once again, we did something illegal, I guess, but to make a buck. And he also used to bring cream out to Sioux Falls. We lived there on West 33rd, and we peddled it around the town to certain customers we had, because that was illegal. You couldn't peddle cream, you know. And it was 25 cents a quart for heavy cream. And that would be more than what they could get back home at the creamery when they took their stender into the creamery. So I think back of all these different things that happened, what you did to make just a buck or two, you know. But I enjoyed trapping gophers. I used to trap a lot of them, you know, from spring till fall, and that was my income, you know. When we lived there, I could on North Prairie Avenue, I could walk downtown Sioux Falls and go to J.C. Penney's and buy a pair of what we called tennis shoes, the high sneaked in, for 59 cents a pair. And we also had a Nabisco cookie factory in Sioux Falls, and that was a good place to go because they had a counter set out, sacks were open, and there was only about a pound or two of cookies in each sack. You could look in and see which ones you wanted, and for 10 cents a piece you could buy a sack of cookies. And lots of times after I get my gopher money, I'd go there and buy a couple sacks of cookies to take home. And I bought radishes. I know a real cheap bunch of radishes one time for 5 cents to take home to Mom. And then one day, Irene and I went downtown shopping. And on the way home, somehow, she lost $5. Well, you would have thought we lost $5,000 when we got home. Mom cried, and it was terrible, you know, to lose $5 in those days. But the more I talk with you, the more of these things come back about the life that we lived and how little we had, you know, and how thankful we were for what we did have. And we didn't know we were poor. We were content. We were happy, you know. And everybody else was in the same boat. And around Sioux Falls, a lot of people dug basements, and they lived in the basement. They couldn't afford to put a house on top of it. And there was a lot of people living in basements out in Sioux Falls area at that time. Oh yes, yeah. Well, we left South Dakota in September 1935 with $35 in my dad's pocket, 5 days on the road, and Mom cooked on a little 2-burner gas stove that we had. We had one big box in the back of the old 27 Pontiac, and that was all the earthly belongings were in there, and the clothes we had on our back. You wore overalls a lot. We all did, the whole family, Papa, all his kids. So I went to high school, I had one pair of pants. I wore those same pair of pants every day to high school. I think there was some sort of corduroy. And that you wore the same clothes every day in, day out. Mom wash them over the weekend, so you'd be clean for Monday. But, well, when we landed here, we landed down at Aunt Frances, Uncle Chris's, in September. And we stayed with them, and Dad was supposed to have a job at the Lehigh Cement Company down here. But from the time we left Brandon to come to Pennsylvania, the manager of the Lehigh Cement, who was a neighbor to my Uncle Chris, and Al Hunt was his name, and he had said Uncle Chris he would give my dad a job if he came out here. Well, from the time we left till we came here, Al Hunt lost his job as manager down there because he was taking a kickback from the Italian workers in Martin's Creek, and the company fired him when they found that out. So we got out here, my dad didn't have a job like he had anticipated. So his Aunt Lizzie lived in Peaburg. She was from the Klein clan out in Long Island. She had 2 brothers, Uncle John and Uncle Casper. And Dad had visited them a few times. In fact, they had visited us in South Dakota a couple of times. And they would go, they had a chauffeur, and they would go for trips around the country. And they stopped a couple of times at our place in South Dakota. I remember seeing Uncle John and Uncle Casper. When they lived together, the 3 of them, Aunt Lizzie kept house, and for the boys, her brothers, and did all the banking. And the boys farmed potatoes, and they were good farmers, and they made a lot of money. So over the many, many years, as she banked, she got a little bit stingy, and she put some money in her account and some in theirs. And after a few years, they caught up with her. She had $57,000 in her account, and that she had actually stolen from her brothers. When they found that out, they made her get out. They just kicked her right out. Well, she had been to Peterborough a couple of times before that. I guess I don't know how she ever met Uncle Martin, but they did. So she moved to Peterborough, and then she and Uncle Martin got married. Well, of course, she had a chauffeur too. They came out to see us a couple of times with a chauffeur and all. $57,000 in those days is worth like $5-10 million today, you know. And so she said to Dad, "Do you want a farm?" He said, "Yeah, but I can't get started." And she said, "We'll help you." So I looked around and found that this farm was for sale. So they dickered for it and bought it for 58 acres for $5,800. In those days, every farm that was sold around us was sold for just that price, $100 an acre. And my dad had often said that if you only had the money to buy more of them, some days they're going to be worth money, and he was absolutely right. My dad only got to 5th grade in school, but he was still a very sharp man, and he was extremely good with figures. But in those days, when he was growing up, the kids worked all spring and all summer and early fall at home in the farm, and then he went to school a few months of the year. There was no compulsory schooling, you know, so farm kids came to school whenever they had time. That's what they had up to. So they bought the place, and eventually we paid them for it. But they bought the folks a team of horses, and we went to household goods sales and bought some beds on household goods. There was a lot of sales in those days, and bought a kitchen table out there, which is solid walnut, for $7 on a sale, right above the Palmer Park Mall. I know the house still stands there, but we bought that. So eventually we paid them off, and I worked behind the horses for 7 years before we bought our first tractor in 1941, old F-20 Farmall. Otherwise, I did all the field work walking behind the horses, plowing, working down the fields, walking behind the drill, and put a lot of hours and a lot of miles on that little length of mine, I say, back in those days. But we went into pigs. One time we had 150 pigs. I thought that's a good way to go, but that wasn't enough steady income. We went into broilers for a number of years, and that.
What is that?
Broilers are chickens you raise to 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds, and you sell them.
Okay.
Okay. And there was a market for them, but you couldn't have enough turnover. You didn't have enough room to raise enough chicken. So we began to see back in the early 40s, very early 40s, that the best way to go would be dairying meat because you could have a steady income. So we started with cows. We remodeled the barn a little bit, Dad and I, and started with cows. The barn used to have an overshot. It did not have an extension on it like it does now. And we had room for 25 cows in there. Of course, everything was hand. You cleaned the gutters by hand, all the work was by hand, all hand milked at first. We didn't get electric in this area until 1941. That's when the electric first came out to the country. And of course, we all put electric in as soon as we could. Then we get electric milkers, went downstairs real luck and bought a couple of milkers. They had the bucket type, you set between the cows and the milk went from there right into the bucket, like we still have one down in the barn for fresh cows. But in 1948, we remodeled the barn and put an extension on, so we have room for 40-some cows, 48 then. And so things were starting to get a little better for us. We had more income. And in 1948, remodeling the barn, Lynn had just been born. She was 6 weeks old. And Dad and I were jacking up the barn, and we have these 4-inch lolly columns full of cement that hold the beams up. We were jacking up, Ruth was standing there, and all at once when the lolly columns started falling out, we were left to go. Ruth went like this to catch it, and it went down across her foot, and bruised her foot so badly for 6 weeks she couldn't even walk on it. And Lynn was a baby then, so like I said, I did everything but nurse her. I bathed her, I changed her, I did everything. Ruth could only sit on the couch for 6 whole weeks and do nothing, you know.
Do you want to back up to when you were dating Grammy? How you met Grammy?
Well, some of the neighborhood kids, George Young drove kids to school. He picked up Ruth, and Christine, Floyd, Johnny Letson, they were supposed to pay him $1 a week for gas. And took him into high school and brought him home. And I had heard, I used to go there and play ball with her brothers. And she'd be out there too. And I had heard that, you know, she might like me a little bit, you know. So there was a weightlifting meet down at, I was a weightlifter then, there was a weightlifting meet down at Sioux Eddy. And Ruth and about 6 of her cousins were down there swimming. And after the meeting was over, they walked home. And so I went up the Fritchie Hill Road, going up about halfway, and asked if they wanted to ride. They said, yeah. So I asked her, I asked her for a date to go out. And she said she'd have to ask her mom and dad. Well, Ethel was there then, and the Magdalene always had a lot of people there on this was Sunday night. And so she asked her dad, he said, ask your mom. She asked her mom and asked her dad. Asked your mom, asked your dad. Ethel said, oh, let her go. So she did. So, but what did Lester had to go along. Lester had to go along, see. So we went to County Line Grove, Western Entertainment, ice cream and whatnot. And I brought her home that night. And then we talked about, well, the next date was on a 4th of July, fireworks at the Easton House at Hackett's Park. So, but when I picked up the first day coming up Fritchie Hill, 6 kids, cousins had to climb in the car too, you know. But at Hackett's Park, we sat and watched the fireworks, then I brought her home. And that was the night I said, you know, I'm going to marry you someday.
Aww.
Yeah, I did. You know, I laugh about it. Now, the second time I took her out, I was so sure of it.
So how long did you have to date her before you asked her to marry you?
Well, we didn't get married till a year later in September. We started 40 and 40, got married in 42, September, 42. Yeah.
And she graduated from high school.
Right.
She got confirmed and got married all in the same year.
Yeah. Engaged, married, and confirmed, graduated, all 1 year. Yeah. Yeah.
How old were you when you got married?
I was 25.
And how old was she? 19?
18.
18.
Yeah.
So you're into the 1940s and the war.
The war came along.
Tell me about that.
I was working at Bethlehem Steel to help buy a tractor and a few cows. We're just getting started. And I was called up in the draft. The war broke out in December, and in February I was called up in the draft. At that time, they were gone. So I signed out at Bethlehem Steel, got on a train, went up to Wilkes-Barre, went through Army doctors, and they rejected me because of my right hand. They put down congenital deformity of the right hand, and they rejected me. I was a 4-effer. They sent me home. Well, we were getting in more cows right at that time, last year in 41, 42. And I was called before the draft board in Easton 3 times and reviewing my case. And they finally decided they needed farmers. So you would get so many points for 10 acres, you get so many points for so many cows, and I had enough points to keep for 3 or 4 guys out of the service. And so that's what they did. Then they made me a 3A, they called it. And you were exempt from the service because they finally decided they needed farmers. And so I took my chances, but that was it. And
Did you want to go into the service or not really?
I had no objection to going. In fact, I wasn't concerned when I had to go, you know. So if I have to go, you know. But,
and what did Grammy do for the service?
She worked down at the parachute factory on 13th Street. Even after, for a number of years, after we were married, she worked down there. They made parachutes down there, yeah. In fact, when Brother Johnny was in, he was in the paratroopers, and the war ended while he was on his way to Japan. So he got a hold of he sent a parachute home, and I don't know who it was, made his wedding dress out of the parachute. They were white silk, yeah. They were white silk, yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So when was Uncle Corky born?
He was born in August 4th, 1945.
So tell me about the kids.
And Well, let's see. Tell you about Corky? I can go back and say for the kids of the 40s, these kids you still raise. We could raise them all over again, no problems. Liz was born in 48, and your dad in 58, and Lori in 62. But all the kids worked in the farm. I remember Lori one day, she's helping with some work. She's never lived up to that because she said, when I get big, Daddy, you won't have to do nothing. I'll do all the work. She was just a little kid when she said that, you know. But yeah, they all worked on the farm. Your dad, when he was, I don't know how old he was. He was probably only about 12, 14. Dale Magno worked for me then. That's our nephew, Academy. And he would come over the day after school was out and wouldn't go home till the day before school started, right in Academy, because he liked the farm so much. And he's still a good buddy. But your dad had no interest in the farm, none whatsoever. And he used to think it was terrible the work we did and all this and that. So, but it's funny, when he went to high school, once he did a complete reversal, and he took the farm like a duck takes the water.
Kind of like my brother's doing.
What?
Kind of like my brother's doing.
Yeah. So, of course, Cork had a scholarship to Yale, and then went to Muhlenberg. Your father could have gone anywhere else with his brains. Your father was a good head on his shoulder. Lori went to Williamsport Community College for nursery management designing, and looked at it somewhat.
So what else do you need to tell me? What else do you want to tell me?
Let me tell you. Well, the first years we were here, the first couple of winters, they were real stiff winters. And the old house wasn't that warm, and old windows, you know. And you had a cook stove that you heated with, and a parlor heater. But we made most of our money back in those days, in wintertime, shoveling snow. The township had one little truck with a little snow plow on it. And Doc and Dad and I shoveled snow day in and day out for 35 cents an hour. We just shoveled Ayers Road, all these roads around here, all our own back roads. Cal Ackman was over here, was the road boss. So he'd walk around and line up us farmers to come and shovel, and we'd go shovel day in and day out. Well, that was good money in those days, 35 cents an hour, you know. It really helped us out a lot. And where Mike Yotzler, old Mandy Salt lived there, we'd be up there shoveling nearby, and she'd always invite us to come in there and eat our lunch, get in out of the cold and to eat our lunch. But back in '44, we had so much snow that I hauled our milk in milk cans. I hauled ours, John Ackman over here, Alfred Ayers, and Pappy Mangles down the river road for 6 weeks with a team on a bobsled in milk cans. I'd go down there and meet Padules and the milk truck. And they'd have extra cans, of course, and we'd just switch cans. But I had to go across the fields, the roads weren't open. And that is very similar to when your mother was born. That was a really a nasty cold wintry day. I came in the house about, I guess it was 6:30 or 7 or so, and I said to Ruth, oh boy, well, I'm glad this day is in. I said, I wouldn't want to go out this tonight. About that time the phone rang, and it was your grandfather. Would I come up and help get his wife down the road by Hutchison's when the roads were plowed open so she'd go into Easton because the baby was due any day. So I said, sure, I have to go. Went out, hitched up the horses to the sled, and started out, picked up your mother, met Ray Cromer just below your folks' place, and he's going to go with us to help. We got right above where Dougie Metz's house is, and we had a pretty good grip, and the sled tipped over, and your mother rolled out, and your grandmother rolled out of there. We had to get the sled up in the upright position and get her back in. And John was along too, you know. That's who it was, yeah. I'm sorry, it wasn't Ray, it was John. So we had to get her back in the sled, and we took her down to Hutchison's, which is where Jaskowitz lived now. And that road was open from there on down to the river road in the Easton. And they took her in, and I don't know where she stayed that night. She didn't go back to the hospital. I don't know who she stayed with that night, but somewhere in the Easton. So she go to the hospital next day or two when your mother was born.
Might have been her father or
It
his
must have
father.
been. It could have been.
Might have been
Yeah, it might have
Papa.
been. It might have been your Papa, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
When did you build the summer kitchen?
When did we do that? Well, when Ruth and I got married, we lived with Mom and Pop here for 2 years. Then we decided to move over to the summer kitchen. So I ran the water from this house over to the summer kitchen, and we fixed it up. And we used there was an old fireplace in there, and we put our stove back in there. And we had a nice, cozy little place. And we lived in that for, let's see, 42, 44. We lived there from 44 till 52. So Mom and Dad built the house where your folks lived. I moved up there. Then we moved over here. And then we tore the old summer house down, which had a foundation of 4 foot wide, 4 foot deep, of small stone for a foundation. That's where they laid the logs on. Just laid them on there and built the house up from that, the old summer house. And that's where some of these logs in this house came yet from that old summer house, these uprights here. And some out there in the kitchen came from the old summer house. But we figured the summer house had to be built before they built the main house. And the Pennsylvania Dutch always built a summer house because that's where they lived in the summertime. They did their cooking and their canning and everything else. They wouldn't live in the main parlor or anything like that. And the steps out there, of course, came out of the old summer house. But
so when did you guys build the new kitchen? When did you build the...
We built the kitchen 30 years ago. Just 30 years ago we built the kitchen on. And I had gone over to people's school. I had started the kitchen. I had the foundation dug. I had the subflooring on. And I wasn't the world's best carpenter. So I said to Alvin Gold, the yard man over at People's Coal Supply in Dunkertown, would he help me build an addition on the house? He said, sure. He was a good Pennsylvania Dutchman. He said, it had to be weekends and nights. I said, okay. So he came over and we worked at it. And it turned out real nice, you know. It really did. It turned out great. And Alvin was a good Dutchman. We enjoyed him a lot. And he's the one that helped us build the addition. But this house here, of course, was built in 1857, and I marvel yet at the workmanship of the men back in those days and the people for the tools that they had, you know. It's amazing that they did the job that they could do back in 1857. So we're way over 100 years old now. Yeah. I still have the gun that I bought back in 1941 for. I bought that in 1940 for $8.95 from Sears Robot. It was a bolt action repeating, and it's up to the anvil is now getting a new stock on it and shined up. It still works good. But in 1940, I started working with Irene at the Forks Valley Tavern. It was the nightclub in the area. They had a band every Saturday night and Wednesday night. They had a sunken dance floor, and I worked as a waiter and she worked as a waitress. I spent about a year and a half or more down there, and Louis Oberhofer, the old German that owned the place and built it, he paid us $1.25 a night for a labor from 9 to 1, but the rest you had to make in tips. Well, tips in those days were 10 and 15 cents. If you came home with $2.50 for 4 hours work, you had good money. You were happy. Yeah. But see,
is that where the billiards hall is now?
What?
Is that where the billiards hall is now? The Forks Billiards Hall?
Yeah, the same place, right. Yeah. But see, with that $2.50, like I say, I could go downstairs and buy a pair of overalls for 59 cents. And buy this gun for $8.95. Yeah. And so.
Wow. I think Cork and Chris are here.
I spent 15 months well, I was working at Bethlehem Steel when I was called up in the Army. I spent 15 months at Bethlehem Steel. The worst 15 months of my life. I never liked the job. I never liked the inside job. And after I was rejected by the Army doctors, I went back to Bethlehem Steel because I was working on Sunday when they hit Pearl Harbor. And we guys were in the shower at 3 o'clock. We heard they hit Pearl Harbor. And you had a physical when you first went in there. And then when I went back to take my job back after I was rejected by the Army, I read my physical over that they had reviewed while I was going back to the dispensary to get checked out again. And I come to the part where I've written down farmer as occupation, and I've been angry at them from steel ever since, because they had written good for labor. That's all they thought a farmer was, good for labor, you know. And that really irritated me, you know. Because a farmer has to have a lot more in the ball than being just good for labor. Yeah. Yeah. And their daddy's a good cowman, a good farmer.
You have a lot of memories.
Oh, I have a lot of memories. Yeah. And they're all good memories, you know. Yeah. Not too many sad ones. Yeah.
You want to say goodbye now?
Yeah, I can say goodbye. Good talking. I hope you enjoy. Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you, Pappy.
Thank you, Mandy.